your main character falling to the dark side. Different approaches for writing a series. And this week's showcase, A Chance Beginning. All this and more on this week's Indie Author Showcase. Welcome to the Indie Author Showcase, the podcast by indie authors for indie authors. I am your host, multi-award-winning author Chad Robert Morgan, and let's get started. First, let's answer a little bit with the comments. For that, let's head on over to Brendan Fraser Watch.
Brendan Fraser Watch.
I am still not Brendan Fraser.
This has been Brendan Fraser Watch.
Thank you, Brendan Fraser Watch. Now, recently I got a comment about what I was talking about in Star Wars Episode 3, where CPO had his mind wiped and I called it a cheat. And he said, how's that a cheat? That's working within the rules of the universe. Technically, he's correct. It does work within the rules of the universe, but it still feels like a cheat because it's robbing C-3PO of his agency, right? All the 3 episodes worth of experience he's earned is just gone, right? It's wiped out. Now, it's much easier to write a more satisfying way of explaining why C-3PO didn't go, oh, hello, sir, I met your father. In fact, he was my creator. Out of the story. Now that we have all 6 episodes, or all 9 episodes. In The Rise of Skywalker, he again loses his memory because he has to access some forbidden knowledge. And then there was this whole thing where he says this sweet goodbye. They said R2 could restore his memory, and C-3PO says yes, but that process is a little wonky. It's a little iffy. It might not work. It would have been, now granted, that came way, way, way later. When they wrote episode 3, they didn't know that, so writing this ending is in itself a little bit of a cheat because I'm using future knowledge. But what if instead of simply wiping C-3PO's memory, he commits a sacrifice similar to what he does in Rise of Skywalker? The problem with the sacrifice in Rise of Skywalker is that 2 doesn't really have stakes because R2-D2 can just restore his memory. And they try to play it up a little bit going, well, it might not work. But of course it does work in C-3PO's back. In hindsight, and again, I'm kind of cheating because I didn't have Rise of Skywalker when we had Attack of the Clones. But what if he had done something similar? R2 tried to restore his memory and it didn't work. At least then that loss of knowledge would not have just been taken from him. What if, similar to what happened in Empire Strikes Back, he was blown apart, but when they put him back together, his memory had been wiped in the incident. It still has the same effect, but at least it's not just a throwaway line where we're like, okay, we're wrapping up the movie. By the way, have this droid's memory wiped. Problem solved, canon preserved. It's such really it robs the character of such there's no other way to put that, right? All 3 movies worth, not to mention everything that happened during the Clone Wars, the cartoon series, just gone, taken from them, never to be returned. Going on that tangent, let's talk a little bit about earning something, right? Because that's, to me, that's what it all boils down to. It has to be earned. We just recently had May the 4th, so keeping with the Star Wars theme, let's go to one of the more controversial parts about Star Wars, and that was Anakin becoming Darth Vader in Episode 3. Now, I'm going to compare and contrast that to what recently happened in Maul Shadow Lord. So, spoilers if you have not seen either of these movies or TV shows. Okay? Now, again, Star Wars, I think everybody pretty much knows what happens to Anakin. Maul Shadow Lord is like brand new, so you may not have a chance to have seen it yet. I would suggest checking it out. I thought it was very well told. The animation was fantastic. Just to get you quickly caught up on what Maul Shadow Lord is, and I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. Maul was the big bad guy in Episode 1. It ended with him killing Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi cutting him in half, and he goes down the shaft, supposedly to his death, right? He's, been cut in half. It's kind of hard to walk back from that. But he did. In the cartoon show, Clone Wars, we find out that he did survive, and he cobbled together from the scraps a pair of spider-like cybernetic legs. Later, he replaces those with a pair of cybernetic legs more akin to what humans would walk around in. So he's back to being bipedal. In Clone Wars, he starts on this crusade to restore power and take down Darth Sidious, who has betrayed him. At one point, becoming ruler of Mandalore because he got the Darksaber. Later, in Rebels, he shows up again to try to coerce Ezra to join him. And he finds Obi-Wan Kenobi out in Tatooine, and they have one last battle, and he dies. There is also a quick blink of you miss it cameo in the end of Solo, where it's revealed that he is in charge of the crime syndicate. So this cartoon series is filling up some of that backstory of how he became a crime lord and what he was doing. So in this series, it's I believe it's a 10-part series. While he's going on his mission to regain power and rule the underworld of the world of Star Wars, he runs into a Jedi and his apprentice that are hiding out since Order 66. Order 66 is when the future Emperor gave the clones a command to turn on all the Jedi and wipe them out. So that's how he killed the Jedi, was a sneak attack. Maul gets it into his head that this Padawan is going to be his new apprentice. And throughout this 10-episode arc, he is basically seducing her to the dark side. In Maul, a lot of the people on the internet who are hardcore fans of Star Wars was already pretty convinced that this character was going to turn to the dark side because of a legacy character known as Darth Talon. Now, going into that is a whole thing, and I've already rambled about this too much, but the point is that there was, before Disney bought Star Wars, there was this whole universe of comic books and stories that Disney went, don't count. There was a proposed story where Maul was going to come back and he was going to have this apprentice known as Darth Talon, and everybody saw the similarities, and they thought, well, this might be their way of bringing Darth Talon into the main canon. Maul Shadow Lord, just like with Rebels and a lot of the other TV series, Grogu the Mandalorian, all that kind of stuff, is done by Dave Filoni, who worked very, very closely with George Lucas and knew a lot of his ideas. So he has been kind of picking these little ideas out of what is now not canon, because Disney erased it, and bringing it back into the main universe one bit at a time. And that's how we got Maul resurrected in the first place, because this was an idea George Lucas had. So while it was not 100% certain that this character in Maul Shadow Lords was going to become Maul's apprentice, most fans on the internet were like pretty 80% sure that this was going to happen. So compare that with episode 3, where we knew Anakin was going to be Darth Vader. That was 100% certainty because these were prequel series. That's always a problem with doing prequels. You know how it's going to end. And so that takes away some of the agency and some of the surprise. So it makes it very, very hard to make you care about the characters when you know what's going to happen to them, right? It's not impossible. Strange New Worlds is doing it quite well, actually. By not only the fans knowing what the future is going to be, but Pike knows what the future is going to be, and it hangs over him like the sword of Damocles, which is what I think is a brilliant storytelling decision. Because even when he sees his future coming up and he tries to get out of it, he's shown the repercussions of that and has to basically say, okay, I have to accept my fate or things are going to get much, much worse. And sometimes he gets very, very, I know what's going to happen. What do you want me to do? He gets very, very melancholic about it. So I think that part's brilliant. It gets around the problem of, what do you do when the future is foretold? Well, you let your MC know about it too and let him deal with it. But getting back on topic, so unlike Acolyte, where we didn't know who was going to turn to what and everything like that, we knew somebody was going to be a bad guy because that was sort of the point of the show. We have episode 3 where we knew the hero was going to turn into a villain, and we had Maul Shadow Lords where we were pretty sure that one of the heroes was going to turn into a villain, right? So it's a pretty close 1-1. So now we got all the history and the backstory. You know where we're starting from. Why did Maul, in my opinion, work and episode 3 didn't? There's a lot of times in the prequel series, not in the first movie. First movie, he was just this cute little kid. He was this perfect little angel. He could do no wrong. So we can just kind of take episode 1 out of the equation. In episode 2 and episode 3, they try to sprinkle these little things where, oh, look, occasionally he can be a bad guy. To me, that doesn't work, right? Because first of all, it's not a steady buildup, right? Oh, he killed the Tusken Raiders in episode 2. Yeah, and then what happened? Then he goes out and becomes a hero. He marries Padme. Padme, knows that her boyfriend just basically committed genocide, marries him anyway, right? Like, I think it would have been a much more stronger scene if she came up to him. It's like, what happens? Like, oh, it was horrible. And he starts lying. It's like, I have no choice but to kill them. And then it shows, like, Tusken Raiders begging for mercy, and he's slashing them down and everything like that. I think that would have made the scene stronger. Because not only did he commit this horrible act, but now he's got to lie to cover it up. So now his... Because when you confess, it's a very cleansing experience. That's why, Catholics have confessional, right? If he didn't confess it, if he kept it to himself, it not only kind of adds to his darkness instead of making it a one and done, but it also kind of forgives Padme for still marrying this Nazi, right? She's not okay with this, but she's okay with this. You know what I mean? She's like, no, what you did was horrible. Please marry me and let me have your children. Then you could have gone on to episode 3, and the Chancellor could have gone like, yeah, by the way, why don't you tell me the truth about those Tusken Raiders? It's okay. You can trust me. I won't spill your secret. I think, I'm trying to remember. I think there was again, it was almost like a throwaway line where he mentioned, yes, the incident in the desert or something like that. But then that could have been like this bonding moment between them, right? That was one thing that we saw throughout episode 2 and 3 was the Chancellor trying to get close to Anakin, right? So that part works a little bit. But that would have been an even more deeper connection, because it's like, it's okay. We're going to share this dark secret, just you and me. The Jedi don't need to know. But they don't do that. Instead, they talk about his dreams of Padme dying, and he entices him with some Jedi magic, Sith magic of bringing her back to life, right? Then later, Anakin basically confronts him. He says, "Yes, I'm actually the bad guy." He's like, "Oh no!" He runs to the Jedi Temple and he tells them, and they're like, "Okay, stay here. We're going to go deal with him. There's a big fight." And he decides, "No, I can't let him die because I need that thing to save Padme." He takes out Mace Windu, and then he's like, "Oh, what have I done? I guess I'm a bad guy now." It is such a heel turn, and it does not feel earned. He did this to gain a certain bit of knowledge. And at no point does the Emperor go, "If you want to save Padme, you must join me." He's like, no, he's like, "You're one of mine now. Rise and become Darth Vader." And he's like, "Yeah, sure, okay, I suppose." I remember I was reading like the spoof of episode 3. And even in the spoof of the script, the Chancellor's like, "Wow, that was quick. Yeah, let's go kill some younglings." And then he goes out and just commits mass murder. Which again is such a hard turn. We don't see him hesitate. We don't see him think about it. And then Obi-Wan goes to stop him. He gets mad at Padme and almost kills her. The person he's been trying to save this entire time. And then they get into a fight, and it's like, "Don't you realize the Sith is evil? From my perspective, the Jedi is evil." Where did this come from? You think the Jedi are evil? Why? Because your buddy is dangling some forbidden knowledge in front of you like a carrot, and suddenly your entire worldview has shifted? Again, it does not feel earned. Now, if the Chancellor had shown him maybe the Jedi's plotting against him because they already knew he was the Sith, but he conveniently leaves out the part where the Jedi realize he's a Sith. Doing a little, Fox News re-editing of the show kind of thing. Maybe then that would have gone towards convincing him the Jedi were evil. They don't do that. So, I mean, it's such a weird turn. It feels like he's doing it because the plot demands it. We know Anakin's got to become Darth Vader. We know we have to go from A to B. So they just plow in a straight line, and his motivations are missing. The logic of the character is missing. And he's just instantly a bad guy. It makes no sense from a storytelling perspective. Compare that to this Padawan in Shadow Lord. And I know I'm dropping names on purpose because, again, spoiler alert. If you haven't missed my spoiler alert, I don't want everything given away. So I'm trying to be a little cagey. But this Padawan, in the very beginning of the show, we see her at odds with her master because they're trying to survive. They're on the streets. And the Jedi, the master is counseling her. It's like, "No, we won't steal. We will rely on the generosity of the good citizens to survive." And, she's like, "Yeah, that's fine ideals, but my stomach's growling," right? So from the very beginning, we're seeing the pressure put on this character that the way she's been brought up may not work anymore. And then throughout this run, Maul captures her and tries to talk to her. And she's like, "I'm not listening." But Maul doesn't just fight her, take her out. He's like, just talking to her is like, "Yeah, have you seen those Inquisitors? Those are pretty nasty. I could help protect you from them. I can help teach you how to defend yourself from those Inquisitors. I can help you get revenge for having your order destroyed. We're actually on the same side now. So it's very, very seductive, right? And at first, she's like, nope, 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 not listening, la, 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 la. And he lets her go. And they're like, why'd you let her go? And he's like, give it time to cook. And Maul plays it cool, right? He's not like, fine, you don't want to be with me? F you, and kills her. No, he's like, let her stew on this. And then he finds her again later. You know, the Inquisitors show up, and Maul helps defend her from the Inquisitors. And then it's like, come on, come back to my place. And they're like, are we prisoners? I'm like, you can leave whenever you want. But the Inquisitors are still out there, saying you might want to stick with me if you want to live. So again, he's not forcing her. It's her choice. But he's weighing the options on her mental scale, so it leans towards him. But he's giving her the agency. And then she's kind of like, yeah, I know he's bad, but he did just save me, and he's been keeping his word. Right? So just little by little, he's working on her. And little by little, she's like making concessions. Okay, he's bad, but we are kind of on the same side now. I'm not going to join him. I'm not going to agree with him, but we do have a shared purpose and we need to work together. And at one point, they're even like keeping an eye on him, going like, okay, he's going to backstab us at some point. And he never does. In fact, at one point, there's a big fight. He is the last to get out, right? He could have like double-crossed the Jedi Master and jumped across the ravine first. Nope. Jedi Master goes first. He's the last. He's showing that he can self-sacrifice. He's showing that he is on their side. He is earning their trust little by little to the point where when you get to the big climax, and it's just it's like a 3-on-3 brawl, and Maul picks this moment and says, "This is," and it's subtle. He doesn't just stab the Jedi Master in the back. They're going 2-on-1 with a bad guy. I won't say who because I don't want to spoil things. But he's like, my future apprentice is over here and having some trouble, and her master's over here, and we're taking this guy out. And he gives him a little push, little force push. So he has to deal with the bad guy 1-on-1, and he runs to get the apprentice. And keep in mind, the two of them were fighting this guy and barely holding their own together. By himself, the odds of him winning this thing just dropped. Huge. And if you watch the show, you know the part I'm talking about, and you know the bad guy we're talking about. So the guy didn't have a chance. He really, truly didn't. But definitely not by himself. And what happens is we see this villain kill the Jedi Master, and the apprentice loses her shit, which is part of Maul's plan, right? Or at least Maul took that opportunity to improvise that part of the plan, to put that in there. Because when he went down, when the Jedi went down, Maul was nowhere to be seen. Because he was like, yeah, you deal with them. I'm going to go over here. And then he was right there to help her fight off the remaining bad guys. And then, so now it's at the end, and she is filled with rage and hate and wants revenge, which is exactly where Maul wants her. And she looks at him and she says, I'm ready. Let's do this. It took 10 episodes, a very slow, steadying build up, but we got there. And when she turns, it is earned. It was not a quick heel turn. They could have done that in Star Wars. I mean, episode 2 and 3, that's 4 hours, right? 4 hours cut into 30-minute segments. That's 8. That's the equivalent of Maul Shadow Lord's first 8 episodes. So in terms of time, of span, they had the time to do it, right? It's not like, well, the movies were short. No, the movies were a bit shorter if you don't count episode one, which again basically just introduced Anakin as a cute little kid. So we'll take that out of the equation and just focus on two and three. But yeah, you could have really weaved in and slow walked that turn to the dark side, but they don't. They have him have a moment of evil in episode two, which everybody just sort of glosses over. I killed him, and not just the men, but the women and the children too. Let's go get married. You know that is, you know, that really robs Padme of her character arc as well. That is not the character she is. To forgive that, and she never mentions it. She never like worries about him or anything. It just goes in and out of her mind. And then in episode 3, he's having some nightmares. Chancellor says, I got a way to fix it. And he just does this quick heel turn so he can possibly save his girlfriend, his wife, that he later almost murders himself. And then he gets upset about it at the end. No! You know, the plot points don't line up, right? And it just feels like he's forced down this path and he's banging against the walls because he knows that that's not the right way to go, right? And what I mean by that is it's not the right, you know, it's not like he's fighting trying to become Darth Vader. He has to become Darth Vader, right? It's canon. It's history. But there was a path, an earned path to get there, and someone just put him on a bullet train and shot him straight forward. And from a storytelling perspective, it's absolutely horrible. It does not work. Whereas the Padawan in Maul Shadow Lord, so earned with every single episode. She is getting just a little bit and a little bit more in debt to this Maul guy, and she's just coming around just a little bit more and a little bit more until finally at the end, she's convinced. It is so earned. You feel it. Not only do you feel it, you kind of sympathize. You know it's a mistake. You know she shouldn't be doing this, but you're like, but I get it. It's kind of like that old Chris Rock joke when he was talking about O.J. Simpson.
Now, I'm not saying he should have killed her, but I understand.
This was what was with this character in Maul. We're not condoning what she did, right? We're not condoning her joining Maul. We know he's the bad guy. We know he manipulated her. We know that she is making a mistake. But we understand it. We understand how she got to this position. And we kind of sympathize because we're like, I could see myself getting there too. We can't see ourselves becoming Darth Vader. We can't see ourselves, oh, I killed Mace Windu, now I'm going to take out a school. I mean, that's, you know, how do you get from here to there? I was actually watching a video from Plot Heads, which is a really great channel if you want to sharpen your writing skills. I stumbled across this in my feeds, and I binged, like, I don't know, must have been about a half dozen to a dozen episodes. And he did this really great breakdown on turning a character dark. And the first step is you basically make a small sacrifice, right? Which again could have been Anakin in episode 2 where he killed the Tusken Raiders. He knew it was wrong, right? To go save his mother is one thing, but to take revenge and kill all of them, not just the men, I mean, but to take out the children, he knew it was wrong, and he was upset about it. But the first thing is there's a small sacrificing of your principles. We see this in Maul, where the Padawan is looking to steal to eat. It's a sacrifice of her principles, but it's a small one, just so her stomach will stop growling. We don't apologize for that. We don't. And again, if you want to see this in detail, check out the Plotheads episode. This is the cliff notes of his episode. We don't apologize for that. We rationalize it. I had to steal that apple because I was hungry. Was it wrong? Yeah, maybe, but I needed it. But it's just an apple. Anakin killing the Tusken Raiders. Yes, I know it was wrong, but they killed my mother. Okay. But we don't apologize. And that's where I think episode 3 missteps. Because he goes on this confession, which is, I think, meant as a storytelling exposition, right? We're getting the story out to the audience. But I think it would have been, but like I said before, a confession is kind of a cleanse. It's a way of apologizing. It's a way of getting it off your conscience. We don't want it off Anakin's conscience. We don't want him to confess. It would have been better if he tried to suppress it, to bury it, to pretend it didn't happen. And so he lies to Padme. This starts to escalate. This is the next step, right? You commit a lie, you get found out. Instead of coming clean, you have to start doubling down. And now you are sacrificing your principles a little bit more to protect the first one. And then you start this slow stair-stepping. And that is what I think is missing in the Anakin the Vader arc, whereas Maul Shadow Lord did that quite well. So, but to me, it's always about earning it, right? When you're developing your characters, you're developing your world, you have to earn it. You can't take shortcuts like that. And this is a situation with Anakin where he made choices not because of his character or because of the choices he made or the influences against him, but because the plot demanded it. And when that happens, that's just bad writing, in my opinion. Okay, I've gone on about that way too long. I'll see if I can edit that down to time. But let's get on to this week's showcase. We are talking about A Chance Beginning, Book 1 of the Dreamwalker Chronicles by Christopher Patterson. To talk about this book, I need to talk a bit about series. I was thinking about this and prepare for the show. There's a few different ways you can do a series. One is you can have them be non-serialized. A non-serialized series sounds like a contradiction, but bear with me. When I was a kid in the 80s, what was really popular were Star Trek books, right? Star Trek was in a resurgence because they were doing Next Generation. So there was a lot of books being printed about the original crew. But the writers were all writing their own stories. And Next Generation was busy writing new canon. So the writers had to have certain rules in place, and one was you couldn't change anything. You had to stick to the status quo. In other words, you could not write a book where Kirk died, because it wouldn't make any sense in the next book where Kirk is perfectly fine. If Kirk died in your book, you had to somehow retcon it, right? They traveled back in time and undid it, or it turned out he wasn't really dead, or some other kind of thing. This is typical of actually Star Trek as a TV series. You can watch the shows in pretty much any order. There's only one show in all 3 seasons that's a direct sequel to another episode. That's the only one you got to watch in order. You got to watch that one. You got to watch this one before you watch this one, otherwise it doesn't make sense. Other than that, you can watch any of them in any order. and I mean that's a TV trope, right? And they do that on purpose, so when you go to syndication, it doesn't matter what order you watch them in, and you can just enjoy them. So that's what I mean by a non-serialized series. You know, the same characters, same world, but each episode is unique and distinct and doesn't affect the next one. Move on to that, you have your serialized series. Now, there's two ways to do this. The first one would be similar to like Farscape, which is a great sci-fi show, but it's hard to watch the episodes out of order because they maintain that history, right? There gets to be a point where the main character is split, and then our main group of characters get split into two different groups. One version of the main character goes with one group, one version of the main character goes with the other. One of them winds up dying, and then when they reform, they have to deal with the fact that one of them is dead, a copy of the main character. And the other one has to kind of like pick up the pieces because there's a whole part of his life he didn't experience that his friends did. You know, that all has weight, and you would not have, you know, when you get to that end, you're like, why is everybody upset? And it really gave weight to every episode because, again, if you killed a character in this episode, she stayed dead, which happened several times in Farscape. But that made it difficult for casual viewers to join in because now everything felt like homework, right? I was talking about when Star Trek had all these books coming out in the 80s. That's also when George Lucas revitalized Star Wars with his Timothy Zahn trilogy. And that started a whole cascade of Star Wars books after that. And that was a serialized series, right? If you killed a character in this book, he had to stay dead in the next book. So all these writers had to be coordinated. Because I'm going to write a story about how Chewie saved the day. Chewie died. What? Right? Which happened in these series of books. You know, Luke married. Han and Leia had a set of twins and also had a third kid named that they named Anakin. Anakin got killed. Jason turned to the dark side. His sister had to take him out. Jason killed Luke's wife. All this became canon, right? Which is also why it became more and more difficult to read these books, because if you hadn't been keeping up on it, Mara Jade is dead, what happened? You know, and you were lost. And it started becoming a little bit like homework. The third way of doing a series is what I call J.R.R. Tolkien it. And that is you just write. Your story doesn't have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It just keeps going. This is your typical soap opera approach. This is what you see a lot in comics. The story just continues. It doesn't actually, every episode doesn't really end. It's just to be continued next week, right? That's like traditional 50s Buck Rogers. You know, you went to the movies, you watched it, and the show didn't actually give you a satisfying ending. And they didn't give you a satisfying ending because they wanted you to come next week to see what happened next. And it was meant as a hook. A lot of fantasy people look to J.R.R. Tolkien and they mimic this. Personally, my humble opinion, that's a mistake. And the reason I say that is because my understanding, and maybe I got the story wrong, but J.R.R. Tolkien wanted The Lord of the Rings to be one single book. And the publisher was like, yeah, no. That will be huge. Everybody's going to have to wheel their copy out on a dolly. That's not going to work. So they forced them to split it up. That's why Fellowship of the Rings just sort of ends. Right? It just stops at a weird place. Right? Everybody breaks up. Pip and Merry are kidnapped. Frodo and Sam go off on their own, and everybody split up. The Two Towers seems an even more arbitrary place to split, right? The reason why it was never meant to be split. It was always supposed to be one solid thing. And I think a lot of, especially fantasy readers, I see a lot in fantasy, not exclusively, but I see it a lot in fantasy. You kind of feel like that's the vibe they need to go for, right? Like it's just this big, long, scrolling epic. And so then they write, and book doesn't really have a beginning, a middle, and end, right? It's just, the book is actually just chapter one. There is kind of a hybrid approach between this, and I'll call this the main through line approach, and this is like what we see in Harry Potter. So Harry Potter is 7 books. Each one is a year in Harry's life, going to Hogwarts. I know the last one he doesn't go to Hogwarts until the very end, but you get what I'm meaning. Every year is a basically a school year, right? And every book has a beginning, middle, and end, right? Each one is more or less a self-contained story. But book 4 is obviously influenced by book 3. And there is a through line, a main plot of Voldemort coming back to power and starting a war and eventually having to be taken down by the hero that cuts through all 7 books. So it's this weird kind of hybrid where, the books are not standalone. They are independent on each other, but each one still has a strong beginning, middle, and end. That, I think, is a much stronger way to write an epic series. Because when you write and just stop, and I'm sure it's something that fantasy author or fantasy readers forgive, because again, you can't question Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, perfect novel. But you get just a lot of people mimicking that, and I don't think that's necessarily a good approach. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just not what I personally enjoy, right? So with that said, we go to this week's showcase. A Chance Beginning is J.R.R. Tolkien, as I say. The book kind of just ends. We're expected to pick up book 2 and just keep on going. Again, that's not necessarily a flaw. It is not what I appreciate as a reader. I prefer that beginning, middle, end. I would have preferred it if he did it more of a J.K. Rowling thing where the first book is kind of wrapped up, but we do have this through line that's just getting started, and we know there's more to come. There's a villain that has to be vanquished. There's armies that are forming. We know more is coming, but this chapter has been concluded. And I don't get that from this book. Basically, chapter 1 is like, on to the next book. Let's keep on going. It's just a full motion train. And again, it's not saying it's not a slam against the book. It's just a writing choice that I personally will not pick, that I am not a favor of. But it can be effective as a marketing tool. Again, soap operas have used it for decades to hook you into tuning in every morning, because every episode is going to continue the storyline from where you left off yesterday. So what did I like about this book? Well, one of the strongest aspects of this book, I think, was the characters. I think the character development in this was very rock solid. We focus on 3 farm boys who have gone out into this fantasy realm to basically get out of farming. They want bigger things for themselves. And they very quickly find themselves in a world that is way bigger than they realized, and getting into troubles that they never envisioned. So they start out their mundane life. They've gone from a mundane life to another mundane life, and they're like not happy. It's like, we got to make a change. We got to do something because this isn't working. We came out here to find fame and fortune, and we're shoveling pig shit. That's not the plan. So they decide they're going to go join this war. They get into a caravan run by a bunch of gypsies, and we get to meet the gypsies. And again, a lot of strong character development here. We start learning that, people cast aspersions on gypsies, that's not really earned. We get to know them as people, and so it is very, very earned when the gypsy caravan is attacked by slavers, and some of these people die. Our heroes survive this attack. They help fend off the enemy. They go into the town and they start preparing for their next adventure, which is they sign up with some mercenaries because, again, they're trying to get into part of this war, right? Or this army. Because they want to be soldiers. They want to make a name for themselves. And so they're going out with these mercenaries when it turns out that the slavers that they fought the first time is tracking them down. They want revenge. And so there's a big battle with those slavers. And then they run into evidence that somebody is causing havoc with mountain trolls. And that's where we stop. So next book we get to find out who's getting their jollies having mountain trolls tear up entire villages. The really cool aspect about this is you have these two brothers and a cousin. And Eric is already stepped up as the bright star of the series. We have other characters that are like already eyeing him and saying, "Oh, he's going to become great," or he might be the future savior of this world, or whatever, kind of thing. So he's already got the eye of some pretty powerful people. His cousin Brian is like the complete opposite. He is a cynical little a-hole. But what's cool about the way he's written is he's not necessarily always wrong. Kind of reminds me a little bit about Eric Cartman from South Park, because he'll sit there and like jump in and go, dee, 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 dee. "What are you doing?" "I'm looking for patrol robots." "They don't have patrol robots, idiot. Just go in and get it." He goes in and gets it, comes out. Next thing you know, this patrol robot like comes running by. So it's always played for laughter because Cartman should never be right, but sometimes Cartman's right. And when he is, it's wrong that he's right, right? Brian is kind of the same way. There's times when he's right, and you're like, I don't want him to be right. And because when Brian's right, it means something's wrong with the world. When he's right, it means the world is a bit darker than we really want it to be. And then rounding out the cast of these three farmers is Bethel, which is Eric's brother. He is probably the weaker of the three characters. His sole purpose, I guess, is to get injured. He winds up taking the brunt of the injuries in these fights. Yeah, he was much less developed of a character, but hearing a lot of the back and forth between Eric and Brian was really, I thought, very strong character development, and it did make the book worth listening to. And then, like when we were with the gypsy camps, and we realized that the main gypsy is basically like a religious guy, right? And he's like, "Oh yeah, I used to be a horrible person." He starts talking about all these horrible things he did, but then he saw the light, and he decided to be a good person. And when you hear his story, you realize the guy had reason to be jaded. right? Um, and they formed such a bond with these guys that when they survive the attack and the main gypsy guy is dead and his son has to take over, they bestow gifts on the Eric that later pay off in later on in the book. Um, but it wasn't just like, oh, you saved us, here's your reward. No, it was a sincere bequeathing of items from a passing friend to the surviving friend. You felt that, right? Which again, it felt earned. Like if they had given, like one thing they give him is this jewel encrusted knife, which looks very, very expensive, and he gives it to Eric. If he gave it to Brian, that would have felt wrong, because Brian was a dick to these guys. But he doesn't give it to Brian; he gives it to Eric. Doesn't give it to Bethel. Bethel doesn't get shit. Bethel was helping to fight him off. Brian helped fight off the bad guys. Bethel injured his shoulder fighting off the bad guys. But it was Eric that got the gifts, because Eric was the one that got to know them. Eric is the one that talked to them. Eric is the one that saw these gypsies not as some vagabonds or thieves, but as real people, and formed a friendship with them. And so all that felt very, very earned. So I would say the strongest part about this book was some very rock solid character development. So if you're looking for a Tolkien-esque style epic fantasy, one that is going to go on for about a good 6 books, one that is going to tell a story through multiple episodes of this book, this is for you. And I would say that based on the character development on the first book, you might want to reach that 6th book by the time you get there. I really am kind of interested in how the whole Brian-Eric relationship is going to pan out. I wonder if Brian is going to pull an Anakin and wind up going to the dark side. If he does, I think it's going to feel a bit more earned than episode 3. So check out Christopher Patterson's A Chance Beginning, first book of the Dreamwalker Chronicles. There's way more than I wanted to say, but this episode's gone on way too long, so let's go ahead and cut it here. Next week, remind me, I would like to talk to you a little bit more about book reverb, of what's been happening with that. If you want to try book reverb out for yourself, you can use promo code Spectral and get, I believe it's like a good free 10 credits or something like that. And I will let you know a little bit more about what's happening with book reverb next week. Until then, folks, keep on reading.